Thank you, Doug, for lighting the chalice. Oh, wait a minute, we don't do that yet.
You can do it.
it's
Go for it.
Okay.
This is a UU church after all.
Okay. Now it's time to join YouTube, so let me know. Okay, we're on. Hi, I'm Debbie. I'd like to welcome you all to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tullahoma. And thank you for joining us this morning in person, on Zoom, and on YouTube. And Doug is lighting the chalice. At times our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has that cause to thank with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Announcements. Katie.
Now more than ever, we really need people to step up and help out. Karen had been acting as both president and treasurer. Now both those positions are vacant. We need people to step up, please. Also with helping out with getting the church ready in the morning and cleaning up afterwards. It can't just come down to just a couple of people doing it all the time.
Thank you, Katie. I'd like to announce that the retreat is going on. It'll be the first Saturday in November, which I think may be the 5th. But don't.
It is.
It is, okay. November 5th. We've decided to have soups. I bought some compostable bowls for lunch. So we will need a couple of people to make some soups. Patty, are you here? Is Patty Holland?
I didn't see her, no.
Okay. Is she off? She said something about red beans and rice. So I'm going to try to see if she can make some red beans and rice, because that sounds really good to me. So I will need about 3 or 4 people to make soups and bring them. You can do chili or tomato basil, or if your family is not here, you can make that, was it a cauliflower curry soup?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Bottom line is make whatever you feel like making.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, I was just telling you that was a good soup.
Okay.
Okay. Next Sunday's speaker is going to be Donna Reed, and she is speaking on the science of the heart. Let's see, any other announcements from?
I'm going to be doing a tie-dye workshop at the retreat.
Oh.
We're going to be using ice dye and natural dye powders from plants. So I need to know before I purchase materials how many people to purchase for. In the past we've had large groups and then we've had really small groups. The years I purchase a lot, we have 2 people show up. So if everyone can email me or text me and just let me know how many people to purchase for, that would be wonderful.
I'll send out an email asking people too, because I sent out an email asking people who was coming, and I know I got a few responses. So, but we do need numbers to know how many's coming, so we can do that. And I know I, for one, will be at that. That just always looked fun, but for
My
some
husband
reason.
just gave me a thumbs up, so I guess he needs a new tie-dye as well.
Okay. If you would like to donate to our church, please make the check payable to the UU Church of Tullahoma and send to our treasurer. Let's see, UU Church, send to our treasurer, P.O. Box 331, Tullahoma, Tennessee 37388. And now we have a responsive reading, but it's not going to be a responsive reading. It's just going to be a reading. This is, and it's 459 in your hymn books. This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands. And that's from William F. Schultz. And so now I'd like to introduce Ricky. He is a very good speaker and I appreciate him talking.
Good morning.
Morning.
Ricky.
I'm gonna close this.
You're fine, but just get used to it.
Yeah, it's just Ricky.
So, I'm going to speak this morning on atheism. What is atheism? Simply put, atheism is a lack of belief or a strong disbelief in the existence of a god or any gods. So if it is a belief in nothing, then why even talk about it? Well, simple. Because in order to better understand the world around us, we have to be willing to understand differing points of view. I am an atheist. Yet I've tried my best to understand the world as a whole, to include other people's beliefs. So in this talk, I'm going to go over the history of recognized atheism and try to be as informative as possible. The etymological root for the word atheism, it originated before the 5th century BCE from the ancient Greek atheos, meaning without God or gods. In antiquity, it had multiple uses as a pejorative term, applied to those thought to reject the gods worshipped by the larger society. Those who were forsaken by the gods, or those who had no commitment to belief in gods. The term denoted a social category created by Orthodox religionists, into which those who did not share their religious beliefs were placed. The actual term atheism emerged first in the 16th century, with the spread of free thought, skeptical inquiry, and subsequent increase in criticism of religion. Application of the term narrowed in scope. The first individuals to identify themselves using the word atheist lived in the 18th century during the Age of Enlightenment, the French Revolution. Noted for its unprecedented atheism, witnessed the first significant political movement in the history to advocate for the supremacy of human reason. In 1967, Albania declared itself the first official atheist country according to its policy of state Marxism. Arguments for atheism range from philosophical to social and historical approaches. Rationales for not believing in deities include the lack of evidence, the problem of evil, and the argument from inconsistent revelations. The rejection of concepts that cannot be falsified, and the argument from non-belief. Non-believers contend that atheism is a more stubborn position than theism, and that everyone is born without beliefs in deities. Therefore, they argue that the burden of proof lies not on the atheist to disprove the existence of gods, but on the theist to prove the rationale for theism. Although some atheists have adopted secular philosophies, known as secular humanism, there is no ideology or code of conduct to which all atheists adhere. While there are some religions that are atheistic, like certain sects of Buddhism, for example, that does not mean that atheism is a religion. To put it in a more humorous way, if atheism is a religion, not collecting stamps is a hobby. Despite the fact that atheism is not a religion, atheism is protected by many of the same constitutional rights that protect religion. That, however, does not mean that atheism is itself a religion. Only that our sincerely held, or lack of, beliefs are protected in the same way as the religious beliefs of others. Similarly, many interfaith groups will include atheists, like this group here. This again does not mean that atheism is a religious belief. Being an atheist doesn't mean you're sure about every theological question, have answers to the way the world was created, or how evolution works. It just means that the assertion that God exists has left you unconvinced. Wishing that there was an afterlife or a creator God or specific God doesn't mean that you're not an atheist. Being an atheist is about what you believe and don't believe, not about what you wish to be true or would find comforting. The only common thread that ties all atheists together is the lack of belief in gods. Some of the best debates I've had with some of my friends who were fellow atheists was because they were open-minded to more than just one narrow-minded scope. This is because atheists do not have a common belief system, sacred scripture, or atheist pope. This means atheists often disagree on many issues and ideas. Atheists come in a variety of shapes, colors, beliefs, convictions, and backgrounds. We are as unique as fingerprints. American antipathy for atheism is as old as America. Although many colonists came to this country seeking to practice their own faith freely, they brought with them the notion of religious liberty that extended only to other religions, often only to other denominations of Christianity at that. From John Locke, they inherited the idea that atheists cannot be good citizens or should not be brought into the social contract. In a letter concerning toleration, Locke had written, "Those are not at all to be tolerated who deny the being of God." It was striking then that after the Revolutionary War, when men gathered for the Constitutional Convention, banned religious tests for office holders in Article 6. There would be no government church, no state religion, and except for being signed in the year of our Lord, 1787, no mention of God in America's founding texts. Religious freedom was formally established in the Constitution's First Amendment. The godless Constitution, as Moore and Cranick, who were authors, called it in a previous book, was mostly the product of Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, who fought to keep God out of the document. But while neither was a creedal Christian, both men were monotheists, and like John Locke, their ideas about tolerance generally extended only to those who believed in a higher power. It was another one of the revolutionaries who became a hero for his non-religiousness. That was Thomas Paine, whose common sense had sold 500,000 copies the year that the United States declared its independence. He died an outcast because of a later pamphlet he wrote on religion. Attacking the King of England was fine, but when Paine, in the Age of Reason, set his sights on the King of Kings, he was derided as a loathsome reptile. Let me say that word again, loathsome. Loathsome. And a filthy little atheist. It didn't matter that Paine, like Jefferson, actually identified as a deist, or that his text opens with blunt declaration, "I believe in one God." His criticisms of Christianity were so scandalous that he had written into history as a non-believer. With non-believers starting to assert themselves, believers began more aggressively protecting their faith from offense or scrutiny. Blasphemy laws were enforced against those who insulted God, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, or the Bible. A former Baptist minister turned free thinker, pardon my language today, a former Baptist minister turned free thinker named Abner Kneeland was arrested in Massachusetts for an article that he wrote explaining why he no longer believed in a monotheistic God. Not even the prominent Unitarian preacher William Ellery Channing or the former Unitarian pastor Ralph Waldo Emerson, both of whom rose to Kneeland's defense, could spare him jail time. In New York, a man named John Ruggles was sentenced to 3 months for insulting Jesus in Pennsylvania. Another man, Abner Updegraff, was fined for calling the Bible a mere fable that contained a great many lies. Laws against blasphemy, though rarely enforced, still exist in Massachusetts, Michigan, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Wyoming. All but 3 states passed Sabbatarian laws, which were imposed on everyone, including religious observers whose Sabbath did not fall on Sunday. Such prohibitions linger in blue laws, which now mostly restrict the sale of alcohol on Sunday. One Jewish merchant even took his case all the way to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, only to be denied an exemption because, in the words of the court, whatever strikes at the root of Christianity tends manifestly to the dissolution of civil government. Pardon me. Few, if any, of those prosecuted for violating Sabbatarian or blasphemy laws actually identified as atheists. But that didn't stop their critics from denouncing them as such. Indeed, the charge of atheism became a convenient means of discrediting non-theological beliefs, including anarchism, radicalism, socialism, and feminism. Elizabeth Cady Stanton's agnosticism and Ernestine Rose's atheism were held against the early suffragists. And after 8 allegedly godless anarchists were convicted of killing 11 people during Chicago's Haymarket Affair, and President McKinley was assassinated by an anarchist who had rejected Catholic teachings, atheism became linked in the popular imagination with domestic terrorism. Public attacks on religion. Moore and Cranick write in their account of how atheism became un-American, were presumed to lead to the advocacy of other dangerous ideas. That was a quote from the book. The presumption became both more popular and more potent during the Cold War. It wasn't politics or economics. Some said that distinguished America from its enemies. It was religiosity. From the root of atheism stems the evil weed of communism, the Catholic Congressman Louis Rabat declared on the floor of the House of Representatives. 2 centuries after the founders wrote a godless constitution. The federal government got religion between 1953 and 1957. A prayer breakfast appeared on the White House calendar. A prayer room opened in the Capitol. "In God We Trust" was added to all currency, and "Under God" was inserted into the Pledge of Allegiance. The founders had already chosen a motto, of course, but "E pluribus unum" proved too secular for the times. Even as courts were striking down blasphemy laws and recognizing the rights of non-theists to conscientious objector status, legislators around the country were trying to promote Christianity in a way that did not violate the Establishment Clause. Pardon me, I lost my place. They succeeded, albeit at a price. The courts upheld references to God in pledges, oaths, prayers, and anthems on the ground that they were not actually religious. The phrase ceremonial deism was coined by a Yale Law School dean in 1962. And in the decades since, it has been used by court after court to explain exemptions to the First Amendment. Like saying "God bless you" when someone sneezes, the courts concluded these "under gods" and in God we trust" are innocuous. They belong to the realm of patriotism, not prayer. Contemporary American atheists may be inclined to wage war on religion because religion has been waging war on them for so long. A brief truce was reached at the end of the Obama administration when Congress passed the president signed a new version of the International Religious Freedom Act that officially included non-believers. The freedom of thought, conscience, and religion is understood to protect theistic and non-theistic beliefs, and the right not to profess or practice any religion, the law was revised to read. So here are a couple Pew Research Center factoids on atheism. The share of Americans who identify as atheists has increased modestly, but significantly in the past decade. According to telephone surveys conducted by Pew Research in 2018 and 2019, show that 4% of American adults say they're atheists when asked about their religious identity, up from 2% in 2009. An additional 5% of Americans call themselves agnostics, up from 3% a decade ago. The literal definition of atheist is a person who does not believe in the existence of a god or any gods, according to Merriam-Webster. And the vast majority of U.S. atheists fit this description. 81% say they do not believe in God or a higher power, or in a spiritual force of any kind. Overall, 10% of American adults share this view. At the same time, roughly 1 in 5 self-described atheists, or 18%, say they do believe in some kind of higher power. None of the atheists we surveyed, however, say they believe in God as described in the Bible. Atheists make up a large share of the population in many European countries, and more so than they do in the US. In Western Europe, where Pew Research Center surveyed 15 countries in 2017, nearly 1 in 5 Belgians, or 19%, they say 19%, 16% in Denmark, 15% in France, and 14% in the Netherlands and Sweden identify as atheists. But the European country with perhaps the biggest share of atheists is the Czech Republic, where a quarter of adults identify that way. In neighboring Slovakia, 15% identify as atheists, although in the rest of Central and Eastern Asia, Central and Eastern Europe, atheists have a smaller presence. Despite the historical influence of the officially atheist Soviet Union, like Americans, Europeans in many countries are more likely to say they do not believe in God than they are to identify as an atheist. It's almost like a bad word. Including 2/3 of Czechs and at least half of Sweden. Belgian and Dutch adults who say they do not believe in God in other religions conclude 54% and 53% respectively. So in other regions surveyed by the Center, including Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa, atheists generally are much rarer. Bugger, pardon me. Hit the wrong button. In the US, atheists are mostly men and relatively young. According to a 2014 religious landscape study, about 7 in 10 US atheists are men. The median age for atheists is 34, compared with 46 for all US adults. Atheists are more likely to be white and highly educated and have a college degree, 43% versus 27% for the general public. Self-identified atheists also tend to be aligned with the Democratic Party and with political liberalism. The vast majority of US atheists say religion is not too or not at all important in their lives, and that they seldom or never pray. At the same time, many do not see a contradiction between atheism and pondering their place in the world. About 1/3 of American atheists say they think that about the meaning and purpose of life at least weekly, and that they often feel a deep sense of spiritual peace and well-being. In fact, the religious landscape study shows that atheists are more likely than U.S. Christians to say that they often feel a sense of wonder about the universe. Where do atheists find meaning in life then? Like a majority of Americans, most atheists mention family as a source of meaning. With the Pew survey that they conducted in 2007, with an open-ended question of such. But atheists were far more likely than Christians to describe hobbies as meaningful or satisfying, 26% versus 10%. Atheists also were more likely than Americans overall to describe finances and money, creative pursuits, travel, and leisure activities as meaningful. Not surprisingly, very few U.S. atheists said they found life's meaning in spirituality. In many cases, being an atheist isn't just about personally rejecting religious labels and beliefs. Most atheists also express negative views when asked about the role of religion in society. For example, 7 in 10 U.S. atheists say religion's influence is declining in American public life, and that it's a good thing. According to a 2019 survey, fewer than 1 in 5 U.S. adults overall share this view. A majority of atheists also say churches and other religious organizations do more harm than good in society, and an even larger share say religious institutions have too much influence in U.S. politics. Atheists may not believe religious teachings, but they are quite informed about religion. In Pew Research Center's 2019 Religious Knowledge Survey, atheists were among the best performing groups, answering an average of about 18 of 32 fact-based questions correctly, while U.S. adults overall got an average of roughly 14 questions right. Atheists were at least as knowledgeable as Christians on Christianity-related questions, roughly 8 and 10 in both groups. For example, I somehow deleted a sentence or two, so I'm just going to skip to the next fact. Sorry about that. Okay, most Americans, 56%, say that it is not necessary to believe in God to be moral, while 42% say belief in God is necessary to have good values. According to a 2017 survey, in other wealthy countries, smaller shares tend to say that belief in God is essential for good morals, including just 15% in France. But in many other parts of the world, nearly everyone says that a person must believe in God to be moral, including 99% in Indonesia and Ghana and 98% in Pakistan. And that's according to a 2023 2013 Pew Research Center study. Americans feel less warmly towards atheists than they do towards members of most major religious groups. A 2019 Research Center survey asked Americans to rate groups on a feeling thermometer from 0, as cold and negative as possible, to 100, the warmest, most positive possible rating. U.S. adults gave atheists an average rating of 49, identical to the rating they gave Muslims and colder than the average given to Jews, Catholics, and evangelical Christians. So I'm gonna give you a list here of notable atheists in our history and a quick little quote from each of them. So Aristotle, who was a Greek philosopher: men create gods after their own image. George Carlin: atheism is a non-profit organization. Benjamin Franklin: the way to see by faith is to shut the eye of reason. Sigmund Freud: the whole thing is so patiently infantile, speaking on religion, so foreign to reality that to anyone with a friendly attitude to humanity, it is painful to think that the great majority of mortals will never be able to rise above this view of life. Stephen Fry, who was an actor and a writer: the God who created this universe, if he created this universe, is quite clearly a maniac, an utter maniac, totally selfish. We have to spend our lives on our knees thanking him. What kind of God would do that? Yuri Gagarin, who was a Russian astronaut, said, "I don't see any God up here." Ernest Hemingway, who thought all thinking men are atheists. Thomas Jefferson, who said, "Question with boldness even the existence of a God." Stephen King writes, "The beauty of religious mania is that logic can be happily tossed out the window." Gene Roddenberry, one of my personal favorites: "We must question the story of logic, of having an all-knowing, all-powerful God who creates faulty humans and then blames them for his own mistakes." George Bernard Shaw stated, "The fact that a believer is happier than a skeptic is no more to the point than the fact that a drunken man is happier than a sober one." Leo Tolstoy writes, "The teaching of the church is in a theory of a crafty and evil lie, and in practice a concoction of gross superstition and witchcraft." And I'm going to finish up with Mark Twain saying, "Faith is believing what you know ain't so." So I'm not going to inject any of my personal thoughts into atheism on this. I wanted to keep it informative and not personal. So with that, I'm just going to close. If oxen, lions, and horses had hands and could make fashion of art, they would fashion gods in their own image. And that's from a Greek philosopher. Thank you very much, and thank you for allowing me to talk today.
Thank you, Ricky. That was a great talk. As always, your talks are always well researched. Appreciate that. Let's see. So we'll get up and sing hymn. I think it's 419.
414.
414. Jancy, start us off, please.
As we leave this friendly place, love give light to every face. May the kindness which we learn light our hearts till we return.
Thank you, everybody, and go in peace. And we'll meet back in about 10-15